Oh, Bananza! Finally got a new Donkey Kong game, although kind of not really. One of the things I found kind of funny about this game, and sort of Switch 2 in general, is people are like, yeah, this game's cool and all, but when's the next big mainline 3D Mario game? And I'm like, hello? This is the next 3D Mario game. Make no mistakes, this is Super Mario Odyssey 2, but like how all the 3D Marios have some unique gimmick to them, whether it be FLUDD, or being in space, or the whole capture mechanic, this game's gimmick is that you play as Donkey Kong. And like, is that really that big of a deal to people? No one cares about the gameplay, or the design, or the style, or the tone of the game? All that really matters is that you're not playing as an Italian wearing some overalls? If this game was exactly the same, but you reskinned all of the Donkey Kong stuff to be Mario stuff, would people like it more? Like, seriously? That's the kind of stuff that leads to this nightmare world we're in, where it's constant remakes and reboots and sequels to old franchises. No one wants to make anything new because people are like, but it doesn't have the character that I like in it. Come on, people, look at the game itself. Like I said in my DKC video, I'm not even really a fan of Donkey Kong, honestly. The characters, the world, I just don't really care that much. I love this game as the fantastic 3D platformer collectathon that it is. So let's actually start talking about the game itself now, and I'm gonna discuss this game in the context of it being a 3D Mario rather than a Donkey Kong game. And I'm gonna make a lot of comparisons to Odyssey because that is the previous game by this same team, and this is clearly the follow-up in terms of the game design and the ideas and what they're trying to do. Because yeah, this is at its core pretty much the same kind of game. You have these giant sprawling levels, you have really in-depth movement, and you have a ton of collectibles thrown all over the place for you to grab. It's really just another go at that same Mario Odyssey formula, but just with different variables being played around with this time. I would argue there are three major pillars that kind of set this game apart from Mario Odyssey. One being the fact that we're playing as Donkey Kong means we have a very different moveset. You know, with Mario, you get your triple jumps, your long jumps, your side flips. We don't get any of that in this game. We get a moveset more inspired by the Donkey Kong games, such as roll jumping like the Donkey Kong Country games, or a really big change up here is the ability to climb on almost any surface. And I like that this game has a unique moveset, because if this was another 3D Mario, then we'd be working with mostly the same tools that we've been throughout the entire 3D Mario series. This gives us something a little bit different to mess around with, learn how it works, learn the nuances, and how to get the most out of it. And ultimately, once you get the feel for things, you see that a lot of this is pretty similar to what you can do in something like Odyssey, but you do it differently here. Like I said, it feels like the same kind of blueprint as Odyssey, just executed differently. Second big difference in this game is the Bananzas, all these transformations that you can do to become these different superpowered animals with different abilities. This is kind of this game's equivalent to the capture mechanic, but executed very differently and with very different application. And lastly, you have what I would argue is this game's biggest innovation, the terrain destructibility. That is something I really want to praise Donkey Kong Bananza for, because it's something that's genuinely new for this genre. Other games have had this kind of destructible terrain, but never in a platformer like this before, and it really does set this game apart from any other game out there. There's nothing else you can play that will give you this same kind of experience. Which is important to me, because this team could have made a literal Super Mario Odyssey 2, and I'm sure that would have been great, but I've already played Mario Odyssey, been there, done that. I want to play something that doesn't just feel like a rehash of games I've already played before, and this game is that. It has similarities to games I've played before, but it feels like this game was made with a clear, unique vision behind it. You know, let's make a 3D platformer where the entire world is destructible. How does that work? How do you even do that? And they figured it out and produced a fantastic game out of that idea. It's really worth highlighting how well the game utilizes this system. This is not just a gimmick. This really is the core of the game, even more so than this being a platformer. You know, this being a collectathon, it's about more than just jumping around. These games tend to have a lot more emphasis on interacting with the environment, doing quests for NPCs, having little objectives that you can try to do, and this game is no different, but what's different about it is that a lot of these objectives pertain to the destructible terrain in some way. But even when the objectives aren't overtly about the terrain, that always comes into play somehow, because they really take advantage of this stuff as much as possible. There are so many different terrain types that all have different properties that you can interact with in different ways, and that can interact with each other in different ways. You know, you got the basic stuff like dirt and rock, and even those have properties to think about, like how hard it is to break through the material or how quickly you can pick it up out of the ground. But then, of course, you have spiky thorns that damage you if you touch them, or you have bouncy materials, or there's gold, which is valuable but can also be used as an explosive. You have rocks that glow in the dark, you have salt and this special goop that's like a snail, and you throw salt at it and it starts to dissolve. And of course, there's so many other ones, and they really do a good job of coming up with lots of different ways to utilize these different materials. They even play around with not just destructible terrain, but also constructible terrain. Dirt and snow, you can throw it around and create little structures, which can have practical applications. Even the NPCs of this game take advantage of this system, because the fractones themselves are made out of this destructible terrain, and you can break them as well. And the reason I really like this stuff is because it gives you a lot of options and a lot of things to consider. As someone that grew up playing tons of 3D platformers, I have a lot of affection for this genre, and normally games fall into one of two general categories. You have your action platformers like Crash or Sonic that are more focused on just navigating obstacle courses. You know, they're usually a little bit more complex, a little bit more involved, give you opportunities to do creative stuff with like your moveset. And then you have your collectathons like Banjo or Spyro, and those are usually more chill, a lot easier, more laid back. It's about the fun of exploring. But I feel the 3D Marios and DK Bananza included end up in this nice little middle ground where they kinda have some of the strengths of both of these. Because ultimately this is a collectathon, you got these big sandbox levels, and you're just going around doing stuff and having a good time. But at the same time, you have not only really cool open-ended movement, but this entire game system is very open-ended, bringing opportunities to get that kind of schmovement creativity that you normally find in a platformer, but now incorporating that more into the objective design, where you can go about solving these problems in whatever way you can think of. I guess it is worth mentioning that sometimes when you do a bit too much of this terrain destruction stuff, the performance does start to chug in this game. But I'm gonna be honest, it really doesn't bother me at all. Outside of that, the game runs at a rock-solid 60 all the time, and I don't know, it's kinda cool in a way. It reminds me of like old-school performance problems that you would have in like SNES games or something like that, where you can feel how you're pushing the console too hard because there's so much happening in the game. All this destruction, all these things breaking at once, it kind of feels cool. It's like mega hit stun for the world itself or something. I mean, obviously I'd like these problems to be fixed if possible, but as is, I really don't have an issue with it. Now, all that said, while this game is very different to Mario Odyssey, it is also very similar, sometimes in ways where it feels like they are kind of just doing the same thing again. Like, you have these challenge rooms in the game, and these are identical to the ones in Odyssey, even down to every single one of these having a hidden banana somewhere for you to find. Or even some of the level themes themselves kind of feel very similar to some of the levels we saw in Mario Odyssey. Like the first world here, very similar vibes to the Cascade Kingdom. You have a jungle world that has a bunch of poison water all over the place like Odyssey had. You have this one world that's all themed around food, very similar to the Luncheon Kingdom. And I don't really have a problem with any of this stuff. It just feels a little bit weird to see such similar ideas in 2 games in a row by the same team. And with all these similarities, these 2 games also share some similar problems. Now, I'd like to say that I love Mario Odyssey, and I don't really have many major issues with it. What criticisms I do have, I personally feel, are very minor and don't really hamper the experience very much. But there are a number of people out there that are more critical of that game and have bigger issues with it. And if you're one of those people, Bananza doesn't really do that much to address a lot of those issues. Like, one common criticism that you hear a lot from Mario Odyssey is that there's too many moons. Not a problem that I ever personally felt. I liked collecting all the moons in that game. But if that's how you felt in that game, then it's worth noting that DK Bananza has a similar number of bananas in it. And you do see a lot of non-platforming and copy-pasted objectives across this game, just like you did in Odyssey. For example, finding Cranky Kong is essentially the same thing as finding Captain Toad in Odyssey, and he's in every single world. Or you have these trees that you need to feed gold to spawn up to 3 bananas, and there are multiple of these across the game, and it's exactly the same every time. Or you have these quizzes you can take, similar to the Sphinxes in Odyssey, and again, these are copy and pasted throughout many different levels of the game. Unlike how with Odyssey, there were a lot of moons that were kind of just lying around and you just grabbed them, you have a little bit of that here in DK Bananza, because with so many things in this game being inside the terrain or underground, they gave you this sonar move to help you find things. Very, very useful, but perhaps maybe a bit too useful, because there are many bananas in this game where there's something you're supposed to do to get it that probably would be fun, but you really don't have to. You know, it might be an underground cavern system that has this whole platforming challenge with the banana at the end. But you don't even know that exists because you haven't found it yet. You're underground just doing some sonar and you see, oh, there's a banana over there. And so you just start digging your way over to it and you just get the banana immediately for free. And you didn't really do anything particularly fun or interesting to get it, the thing that you were supposed to do to get it. And to be fair, there are a lot of bananas where you can't do this kind of thing. They're covered with unbreakable surfaces or whatever. But there are still a number that you can do this, and you'll end up doing it whether you want to or not. Another common criticism I saw from Mario Odyssey was that people felt the game was too easy, which I always felt was rather strange because I can't really think of many collectathons at all that I would say are particularly challenging. So I don't know why Odyssey specifically got all that criticism, but if you had an issue with that game being too easy, this game is even easier. And I gotta admit, while these problems didn't really bother me much in Mario Odyssey, in Bananza I do have a bigger issue with these things. Like, with things being too easy, like I said, most collectathons, I would argue, are pretty easy, but I normally don't have a problem with that, because I don't come to these kinds of games for challenge. I come to them for exploration, for the fun of finding and collecting things, I come to them for the charm, and in the case of the 3D Mario games specifically, I come to them for really fun movement. And DK Bananza absolutely has fun movement. It is a blast just to run and jump around this world. But the movement in this game is so ridiculously powerful that you barely have to play the game a lot of the time to get into the movement. Now, there is a lot you can do just with base form Donkey Kong here. You have the classic DKC roll off of a ledge and then jump after, but in this game you also have an air roll you can do to go a little bit further. Also, your first attack or clap in the air will extend your airtime a little bit, letting you get even more distance. And this kind of becomes your bread and butter movement. Roll, jump, air roll, attack afterwards. You can get a lot of distance that way. But then you also have grabbing chunks of the terrain and using that for movement. You can surf around on the ground to get around quickly. When you're in the air, you can use a chunk to double jump, but also you can start surfing in the air and it'll kind of pop you up a little bit, letting you get a little bit more height and distance. You also have a spin jump you can get for even more height, and you can combo all these things together in big sequences that are really fun. Grab a chunk, start with a spin jump, then do an air surf, then a chunk jump, then roll an attack afterward, get tons of height, tons of distance. That's all awesome and gives you a lot of room to start getting creative and see how you can skip platforming sequences in cool ways. That I really like. That feels very, very similar to Mario Odyssey. But then you also have the Bananzas. These are where your true movement power in this game lie. You have the Kong form, which doesn't give you any new movement abilities, but it is much stronger and is much better for breaking through terrain and digging around. You also have the Zebra form, which is much faster than any of the other forms, letting you get more distance on all your air maneuvers. And it's got this dash you can activate to go even faster and thus even further. You have the ostrich form, which can do a hover followed by a glide to get lots of distance at the cost of some height. You have the elephant form, which really changes up the game when you get it, because it acts as basically like a giant vacuum cleaner. Instead of smashing through the terrain, you just suck it up, and then that gives you ammunition to spawn terrain chunks whenever you want, giving you a lot more versatility for doing things like air surfing and chunk jumping. I especially like this form because you get it partway through the game, and up to that point, you've just been smashing your way through the terrain, but right when that might start to feel like it's getting a little bit old, they give you this way to get through the terrain way more efficiently, where now it doesn't feel like I'm digging my way through, it feels like I'm drilling my way through, and they give you a whole world set underground after you get this to really flex this new digging capability. It's really fun, I really like it. And then you have the snake, which lets you do really, really high jumps, and it has a double jump. And on their own, each of these forms are super cool, super fun to use. But the real cool stuff here is when you start combining them together for quick switch Bananza combos. Because you can swap forms whenever you want, there's no Kong barrels here. So you can, for example, use the speed of the zebra form to do a really long distance jump and then switch to the ostrich form to then turn that into a glide and go even further. Or you can go into snake form and double jump up super high, then switch to ostrich form to fly wherever you want. Or you could mid-air switch to elephant form, spawn a chunk, and then do a chunk jump. It is a bit difficult to do because swapping is on the D-pad, but I ended up getting a Switch 2 Pro controller which has 2 buttons on the back of the grip that you can assign to anything, so I made those swapping, and that made it very comfortable and easy to swap on the fly. To be honest, it's really convinced me that, like, oh my god, grip buttons are amazing. If you don't have a controller with them, I would recommend considering it. They're super good. There are no limitations here. You can combine any of these tools in any way and use as much of it as you want. You can use all the forms in a single jump if you feel like it. It almost ends up feeling a bit like a platformer version of Devil May Cry, like doing style switch combos with Dante, which I am all about. And there are so many ways you can combine these moves together that you can basically do anything in this game. Though, admittedly, it is not easy to do. You need to be really precise on your inputs. You gotta know exactly how many presses it takes to switch from this form to that form. You gotta do it very quickly. When you start incorporating chunks there, you gotta make sure you're pressing all the right buttons. It's very easy to get mixed up with all this stuff, and it took me a while to get the hang of it. But once you do, you can essentially fly anywhere at any time in this game, which is insanely fun and super duper awesome, but as you would expect, this completely destroys the concept of platforming in this game, which is common for these kinds of games, especially the 3D Marios, using advanced movement to take shortcuts and skip things. But in this game, I feel like it pushes it a bit too far, to the point where when you get to the end of the game and you have all the forms, you go into some of those, like, challenge rooms and you just, like, laugh at it because you're like, I don't have to do any of this. I understand why the game is like this. You know, they want to make it accessible to all players, so they don't want to demand anything too crazy. But I do still have an issue with this kind of design philosophy that pretty much all the 3D Marios have had since 64. Having all this advanced stuff you can do, but never asking the player to actually take advantage of it. It results in a game that is literally designed under the assumption that the player doesn't know how to play it. You know, you see one of these challenge rooms, and I don't even know what you're supposed to do here. It's some kind of maze or something. I don't know. I just jump over the whole thing. Why wouldn't you? It's so easy to do. Why even put all this stuff in the game, one way or the other? Why have all these really basic challenges that you can completely destroy with the advanced movement? Or why have all this advanced movement if you're never going to take advantage of it? Of course, the answer is that they're trying to appeal to different types of players, because not everyone's going to be able to do all this crazy stuff, and they still want the game to be playable for them, but they know those players are there, and they want to offer them something that they can mess around with that they find fun, and I do appreciate that, and I do find this stuff fun. I just felt myself yearning for actual platforming challenges, because I really was not getting them in this game. This game, for me, kind of becomes the epitome of Mario Odyssey pushed to the extreme, using advanced movement to explore a world, skip a lot of challenges, and collect a bunch of stuff. And that is super fun, and it's absolutely super fun here. But when you have mechanics this crazy, I want to put them to the test, and this game never gave me the opportunity to do that. I was especially disappointed with the post-game here. It is pretty weak compared to other 3D Mario games. It doesn't do anything like Odyssey, where it spawns a whole bunch of new bananas in all the levels. All it does is it gives you a couple of new, like, linear challenge levels, each one based on one of the Bananza forms, and then one ultimate final one. And they're a bit harder than other things you do in the game, and because you can't swap forms, you can't go as crazy skipping things. So they were okay, but I felt like they were still holding back. But I was like, okay, that's fine, because that's when we're going to get to that final challenge, this game's darker side, right? And that's when we're going to really go crazy. And then it's actually really short and not very challenging at all. Probably mostly due to the fact that you can Bananza swap and fly over most things. Really disappointing, to be honest. And while we're talking about my issues with the difficulty here, let's talk about the boss fights. And I know that I bang on in all of my videos about platformers, talking about bad boss fights, but come on, everyone's got to be with me on this. The bosses in this game are a joke. They are super quick to beat and so easy that you can fight most of them completely mindlessly. No joke, my first time ever fighting almost every one of these bosses, I killed them in like less than 30 seconds. And there's a bunch of refights in this game where, oh, now the boss is a little bit harder, but not really. In fact, sometimes those refights are even easier because I've unlocked new moves and new Bananzas that let me break the fight even more quickly. These fights are absolutely terrible, but at the very least, there are a few bosses in this game that are a little bit more interesting and kind of fun. So they're not all duds, but like 75% of them are. And actually, I have similar problems with the combat overall. Not the mechanics, though. The design of the combat in this game is pretty cool because it just uses a lot of the tools that you use for navigating the world. Punch-ins, smashing through materials to break off their armor, taking chunks of the terrain and throwing it at them. You can even take their own projectiles or even their armor and rip that off them to use. Some of them have really tough armor that you can't break normally. You gotta use explosives, or you gotta use your Bananzas in cool ways. There's a lot of stuff here that I actually really like. The combat here works well when you're just going around the world and fighting enemies along the way. But there are also combat challenges in this game that are underwhelming in a similar way to the boss fights. The design of a lot of these is actually totally fine, but they're so brief that you walk into the arena and kill everything before it even begins. It actually takes longer to go into these fights and go back out with loading screens than it takes to actually do the fight. I feel like these could be way better if they were fleshed out a little bit more with more enemies, maybe you have to do a couple of different waves of combat. Then this would probably be really cool, but as it is, these challenges are pretty weak in my opinion. And when you take all of these issues, the low difficulty, the effortless nature of skipping things, and the copy-pasted objectives, they combine together to form what is my biggest criticism for Donkey Kong Bananza, that this game can feel a bit repetitive at times. It wasn't too long before I started to feel myself falling into a flowchart of how to play this game. Walk or dig around and constantly use the sonar to get pings of nearby bananas and fossils, and just take the path of least resistance to get to them, which usually is just dig straight to them, or use your Bananzas to skip whatever platforming challenge you're supposed to do to get them. Once I had that figured out, to be honest, I found the game starting to become a bit mundane, especially early on. I was kinda getting bored with this game, but once I started unlocking more Bananzas, that started to change, because now I had more interesting movement that I was trying to experiment with and figure out how I can use it in cool ways. But aside from that ever-expanding moveset, you are pretty much doing the same thing from the beginning of the game to the end of the game. That's one area where I definitely feel Odyssey is a lot stronger because of the capture mechanic. They're always introducing new things for you to take control of, so you're always changing up what you do level to level. Now, I know I've probably had a lot more criticism for this game than many others, but don't take that the wrong way. I really enjoyed Donkey Kong Bananza. I overall had a fantastic time with it. Most of these problems are more so blemishes than glaring issues for me. I still 100%ed this game and had a really good time doing it, and I absolutely foresee myself doing it again one day in the future. But overall, I would probably say that I like Mario Odyssey more than this game. It's very, very close, but for me, that game's problems aren't as impactful on the overall experience, and I feel that there are a couple of things that that game just does straight up better than this one. Like the music, for example, I don't really think is that great in this game, honestly. Like the main theme, the level themes, they're pretty weak in my opinion. I don't even really remember them. I like the Bananza themes and the vocal stuff, but outside of those, the only stuff I really liked here is like the remixes of classic DK music. And I guess while we're talking about classic DK stuff in this game, I do really like how much this game references the Donkey Kong series overall. There are a lot of references to Donkey Kong Country here, which was a little surprising to me considering the last time this team did a DK game with Jungle Beat, it was completely detached from the rare version of Donkey Kong, and with him getting a redesign here, I figured that it would be a similar situation, but nah, there's lots of DKC here. You got the roll jump, you got Diddy and Dixie and Rambi, Cranky's in this game, you got those 2D DKC levels, and a bunch of other stuff that's really cool. There's even many things here that reference Donkey Kong 64, shockingly. You'd think that game would be shoved off in the corner where we all pretend it doesn't exist, but nah, there's a ton of stuff from that here. You know, you got the "Oh, banana," which I love because I think that shit is hilarious in DK64. It's kind of weird. This game, with its design and the overall like feel and tone of everything, is very 3D Mario, but then it also does kind of feel like a Donkey Kong game at the same time. It's kind of this weird crossroads. I guess kind of like the original Donkey Kong, which there's also numerous references to that in this game. Like the first like tutorial areas got all those girders, very similar to original Donkey Kong. And of course you got young Pauline in this game, and I like her. I think she's really cute. I like the nice little character thing they do with her, where at the start of the game she's afraid to sing in front of other people, and DK kind of inspires her and gives her that confidence to start performing. It's nothing groundbreaking, obviously, but it's sweet, it's nice, I liked it. I know some people have issues with how this breaks the Mario Donkey Kong timeline, because technically Cranky's supposed to be the original DK that kidnapped Pauline, but now she's a kid with current DKs, so what's going on there? Doesn't make any sense. But personally, I don't care in the slightest because it's Mario. Oh no, they're screwing up the totally real and important Mario timeline. What will we ever do? Whatever, man. I think it's a cool idea that they went with. I think they do it well. That's all that really matters to me. Although, this does make one thing pretty weird from older Mario games. The Mario vs. Donkey Kong series, in which DK is in love with Pauline. That's a little strange when you include the context of this, that he knew her as a little kid. But, anyway, moving on. I will admit, DK here does feel like a very different character than, you know, the rare DK. You know, that DK is a lot more rough and tumble, very burly. They emphasize his strength a lot. Whereas this DK is a complete idiot. But again, I'm not really that big a fan of DKs, so I don't really have a problem with that. I think this DK is a lot more fun than the one we've had for a long time, and I love the change to his design. I think it's much better than the rare one. And that's not me saying that, because now we got the new thing. I've had issues with how DK has looked for a very long time, and I think this is a big improvement. It's clear to me that during the development, someone said, at all times, DK is going to make the most exaggerated faces physically possible, and I think it's great. He's really funny in this game. I'm all for it. Though, the Bananza forms, I like them. I think it's a cool idea. I think it's done well. But their designs, they look really weird, and that's clearly intentional, and I think it mostly works. Like, I think they're really goofy and weird and funny looking, but they also kind of have this weird, like, muscle furry vibe to them that makes me a little uncomfortable. Like, why are they so ridiculously muscular and so bulbous and strange looking? Admittedly, that in itself makes it kind of funny, but it is weird, man. It is weird. Also, does anyone find it a little bit weird that they insist Pauline be barefoot the entire game? Like, what's up with that? I think the idea is they're trying to imply that she's poor with, like, her torn-up jeans and dress. But, I don't know, it looks pretty weird with some of those costumes where she's wearing, like, thick winter gear and she's still barefoot. It just doesn't look good, if you ask me. Another thing I want to mention, does anyone else get, like, major Splatoon vibes from a lot of things in this game? Like the music and the way that that's kind of a big emphasis point here, very similar. You got all the gibberish that the characters speak and the songs that use that gibberish. And especially Void Company, those 3 new characters, really big, like, deep-cut vibes from them as this trio of our new bad guys, and you have boss fights with them, and the general style and design of them, it feels very, very similar to something you would see in Splatoon. Not that I have a problem with that. I love Splatoon, and I think that these characters are all really cool and work well. I do find it funny how, especially with Poppy Kong, you can tell that they knew that everyone would be all over that character, because she gets a little bit more, like, fun emphasis than the other ones do, which I'm all for, because I like her too. I also like how everything in this game is themed around bananas, like they're your main collectible. The gold that you collect is technically Banandium, this special magic banana ore. A lot of the terrain in the world itself is shaped after bananas in some way. Just everything in this game is banana. And maybe it's honestly a little bit too much, but I like it because it's funny. And I guess that kind of transitions us into the last thing I want to talk about with this game, the finale. And I'm going to get full spoilers here, so if you haven't played the game for yourself, you don't want to be spoiled, then you can leave now. Think the game's real cool, definitely go check it out. But for those that want to know, let's get into things, because, you know, you're trying to get to the planet core to get the Banandium root, which will grant a wish. Which, again, I think this is funny, that apparently at the center of the planet in the Mario universe is some cosmic banana. And Void Kong wants to get his hands on it to make his wish come true, and we obviously gotta stop him. But then, oh my god, King K. Rool shows up. I had no idea in my DKC video that when I alluded to K. Rool coming back one day that he was in this game. That's pretty cool, very satisfying to finally have him back. But, if I'm honest, I feel like maybe this is just a little bit cheap, because the game, while it does allude a little bit to K. Rool here and there, it's not very much, and the whole game up to this point has been about stopping Void Kong and what he's up to, and then at the 11th hour, that gets completely derailed for a nostalgia fest where we fight K. Rool again. And it just feels a little bit unearned, in my opinion, like Void Kong didn't actually end up mattering very much. I don't know, it's not like a big deal or anything, but it rubbed me slightly the wrong way. But aside from that, the whole finale of this game is, of course, very, very cool. I like how they do the DKC credits fake out, that's pretty fun. And then when it comes to the actual true climax of the game, I went into this knowing, of course, that this is by the 3D Mario team, the same team that did Odyssey, that did Bowser's Fury. I went into this game expecting some big, crazy, epic climax, and yeah, that's exactly what we get. And it's definitely super cool. We go to New Donk City, and it gets flooded with evil banana juice or whatever, and we have this big fight with this transformed K. Rool. Definitely some awesome stuff. But the fact that I knew that something like this would happen at the end of this game, I had in my head an idea of what this might be like, and I actually felt like this climax fell a little bit short. I feel like they should have taken it one step further. The thing that's really missing for me here is I thought for sure we'd get some special ultimate Bananza transformation. You know, Pauline would sing this big new song, and it'd make you cry, and you'd turn into this big crazy form, and you'd have an epic kaiju Godzilla versus King Kong fight with K. Rool. But they didn't end up doing that, so that was a slight letdown for me. Like, Pauline doesn't even really have much to do in the finale. He even could have brought back the Void Company characters. Poppy Kong and Grumpy Kong, you know, they turn good, they become your friends, they help you in the finale. What can I say? I've seen a lot of things that do this kind of climax, so my expectations for these are really, really high. So this fell a little short for me. I mean, it was still awesome, and I really enjoyed it, but I definitely think overall Odyssey has the more satisfying finale. So yeah, that's DK Bananza. Excellent game. Really, it was kind of exactly what I was expecting it to be, and I thoroughly enjoyed nearly the whole thing, minus a couple of problems. And I guess I now know the answer to the question I was wondering. After Mario Odyssey, how do you possibly top that game? Well, it seems the answer is you don't try to. You change things up, you make a Donkey Kong game instead, and basically do the same thing again. And I honestly do not have a problem with that, and I'm very much looking forward to whatever this team does next.